Have you ever held a rosary in your hands and felt something invisible watching you? It wasn't fear, it was a kind of presence. As if by touching those beads you had activated a direct line to heaven or awakened something that had been dormant inside you for years. That's exactly what Leo XIV revealed, unfiltered, in one of his strangest and most forgotten messages. He wasn't speaking to crowds. It was a solitary recording made at night, the camera trembling slightly. No papal tiara, no altar, just him, the rosary, and a lit candle. The rosary is a weapon, but a silent weapon, and when it is prayed with true gratitude, it opens a courtroom in heaven and a battlefield on earth. The words sounded poetic, but carried something darker. According to internal Vatican records, never officially released, this declaration came after a series of supernatural events within the walls of the Holy See. Reports of nuns fainting during prayer, of crucifixes glowing momentarily, and of a sound, an inexplicable whisper, always coming from the direction of the Pauline Chapel. It was after one of those nights that Leo XIV wrote in his diary, "They underestimated gratitude. They thought it was just a feeling, when in fact it's a key." A key to what? He didn't say. But the most revealing clue was in his hands, the rosary. Not as an accessory, but as a weapon of war. Except, and here's the most overlooked detail, the Pope didn't ask people to merely pray. He asked them to do it with true gratitude, as if that were the password, the secret code, the difference between repeated words and an open portal. What most don't realize is that there is a kind of prayer that rises, but does not break through. Empty words, automatic prayers. But when there is real gratitude, not the rehearsed kind, but the one that springs from a crushed heart, from a man who lost everything and still praises, something shifts in the invisible world. It's as if the heavens lean in, as if the kingdom takes note. True gratitude is not a compliment to God. It's a sword placed in his hands. And those who pray the rosary like this never pray alone. Maybe that's why Leo XIV, that very same night, whispered something frightening at the end of the recording. What's coming will only be overcome by those with a grateful heart. Not brave, not powerful, but grateful. Then the camera fell, and the video was never aired again. But the question still echoes today. Are you praying out of ritual, or as someone wielding an invisible weapon? Are you ready to go deeper? Because what Leo XIV started that night didn't end there. A few days after that mysterious recording, a group of Benedictine monks was urgently summoned to the Vatican. They didn't know why. They were simply handed a sealed envelope containing a direct request to bring an ancient codex that had been locked away since the 12th century, known as the Libellus Gratiarum. This manuscript, ignored for centuries, described in detail ancient rituals of prayer with gratitude. But the most striking part was a marginal note, handwritten by an unknown monk. "He who prays with gratitude sets angels trapped in time free." Angels trapped in time? Leo XIV believed it. In a private meeting with his closest theologians, he shared a shocking theory that there were messengers of God designated to act in specific eras, but who had been spiritually blocked by the hardening of human hearts, by ingratitude. He cited Psalm 50, "Whoever offers praise as a sacrifice glorifies me, and to him I will show the salvation of God." Psalm 50:23. But according to the Pope, the most ignored part was the word sacrifice. To him, true gratitude is an altar built with pain. When you give thanks while bleeding, when you praise without understanding, you are offering something that even angels cannot produce. That, he said, opens portals. And then something even stranger happened. In St. Peter's Basilica, during an ordinary mass, a simple woman from the interior of Sicily began praying the rosary with tears in her eyes, murmuring between sobs, "Thank you, Lord. Even without answers, I trust." At that moment, several candles went out and relit on their own. Later, on the Vatican's internal cameras, something was captured behind her, a luminous figure with eyes closed, as if being awakened. Leo XIV remained silent for days, then wrote another phrase in his diary. She freed a guardian, and had no idea. A guardian of what? He didn't say, but he began sending secret letters to various monasteries around the world, asking one thing: to gather grateful intercessors, not exorcists, not scholars, but broken people who still knew how to give thanks. According to him, the true battlefield was shifting, and only gratitude ignited in the midst of darkness would have the power to move heaven. Have you ever stopped to think that your suffering might be the very altar where God is waiting for gratitude that sets free? Maybe it's not time to complain. Maybe it's time to pray the Rosary as one who lights invisible swords. From that point, everything began to spiral out of control. From that point, everything began to spiral out of control. Pope Leo XIV, until then discreet and reserved, began behaving unusually. He would interrupt meetings with heads of state to retreat into prayer. He cancelled diplomatic trips to visit forgotten convents. And, in an act no one understood, he ordered all the golden crests in his papal chamber to be removed, replacing them with a single phrase written in Latin: Gratiarum pugna est. Gratitude is war. The Curia found it strange. Some bishops began to worry. But what few knew was that in the early mornings, Leo XIV would descend alone into the crypt of St. Peter, not for formal prayers, but to pray the Rosary with tears in his eyes. According to confidential reports from a Swiss Guard security officer, the Pope would spend hours repeating the sorrowful mysteries with gratitude, not petitions, not pleas, gratitude. Thank you for the crosses, for the betrayals, for the pain that shaped me. Udai. And in the dim light of the crypt, the guard swore he saw shadows moving, as if ancient columns were breathing. This was no metaphor. It was real fear. The Pope believed that by praying the Rosary with authentic gratitude, he was reactivating forgotten spiritual forces, and that this practice was a kind of reverse liturgy, not to celebrate a visible sacrament, but to confront an invisible enemy, and that enemy had already been identified. In the Vatican's secret archives, Leo XIV found records of an entity mentioned only as the murmuring, a spiritual force that fed on complaints, grumbling, and ingratitude. According to medieval monks, the murmuring was not a common demon, but a spiritual environment, an atmosphere, a poison that spread among the faithful and blocked answers from heaven, and the antidote, gratitude. That's why the Pope began to secretly distribute small wooden rosaries engraved with the words, non murmurabis, do not murmur. These rosaries weren't sent to cardinals, but to widows, the sick, prisoners, the poor, broken people capable of giving thanks in the midst of ruin. Leo XIV understood something few grasped. True gratitude is not born from comfort, but from chaos. And according to him, when someone prays the Rosary with that kind of heart, all of hell backs down. Because where there is gratitude, the murmuring starves. Do you feel like your prayers aren't being heard? Maybe it's because your words come from your hands, but not from your heart. Praying the Rosary with gratitude is like digging a well in the middle of a desert. It takes time, it hurts, but when the water gushes, it comes straight from God's throne. That silent spring, something shifted in Rome's spiritual atmosphere, not visible to tourists. But within the Vatican walls, seasoned bishops began to notice a strange unease. Morning masses were celebrated with more fervor, but also with more tears. Confessionals stayed full, and in the corridors of the papal residence, some clergy reported hearing voices, whispering biblical verses in Latin, even when no one was around. The epicenter, Leo XIV's personal prayer chamber. This room, hidden beneath the apostolic palace, had been sealed for centuries. Known as the Camera Orationis Penitentiae, the chamber of penitent prayer, it once sheltered monks fleeing the Inquisition. And it was there that Leo XIV chose to pray the Rosary with gratitude every single day for 3 hours, without fail. A Cistercian monk, secretly invited by the Pope, wrote in his diary, "When he prays, it's not like a pope. It's like a dying man before the throne of God. His gratitude bleeds." But what most frightened those around him weren't the chants nor the silence. It was the phenomena that began happening to those who received the rosaries engraved with non murmurabis. A woman who had lost 3 children in an accident and still gave thanks to God was filmed in the hospital while praying the rosary. In the footage, captured by chance, a light flickers and a white figure passes behind the curtain. The doctor who reviewed the video, a staunch agnostic, asked to be baptized 3 days later. Another case involved a young heroin addict who received the rosary during a Franciscan outreach. When he held the beads and began to repeat, "Thank you," even while crying in rage and guilt, he had a seizure. But what seemed like an attack was, according to witnesses, a deliverance. He woke up hours later whispering, "The darkness left, but it left a void, and in the void, I heard God." These stories reached Leo XIV, and instead of joy, they brought him a kind of dread. Because he knew, when miracles become frequent, it's a sign that something terrible is also drawing near. That's why he called a private meeting with 3 trusted cardinals and declared, "The next attack will not be against doctrine, but against gratitude." He believed the modern world was building a culture of victimhood, comparison and complaint, and that this prepared the perfect spiritual ground for the full manifestation of the murmuring. And according to him, only a generation of the grateful would be able to withstand the new system. Maybe you've never thought of it this way, but your gratitude might be the only invisible wall between your home and spiritual collapse. Can you still give thanks, even in silence, even without understanding? Then know, heaven is still listening. If you've made it this far, something has already begun to move within you. Because the truth is, this story isn't just about Pope Leo XIV. It's about what's happening now, and maybe inside your own home. After the signs intensified, Leo XIV made an unprecedented decision. He summoned a secret group of ordinary believers, anonymous people, souls no one applauds, silent widows, forgotten sick, young people who had lost everything except faith. They all had one thing in common. They prayed the rosary with gratitude, even while bleeding on the inside. This group was given a name that never leaked to the press, the Sentinels of the Broken Rosary. They held no titles, no ecclesiastical authority, but they received handwritten letters from the Pope with direct instructions to keep the prayer of gratitude alive in strategic places, hospitals, prisons, schools, cemeteries. And in every place where these prayers echoed, the spiritual atmosphere changed. A nurse, one of the sentinels, reported that in her palliative care unit, where death was routine, machines began failing at the exact same time, 3 a.m. every Friday. But the patients didn't die. They woke up, and they said they had dreamed of a man dressed in white, holding a rosary that glowed like fire. Another converted prisoner, upon receiving the Pope's rosary, had a vision inside his cell. A cracked wall revealed a staircase descending into hell, but at the top of it, a rosary was tying the gates shut, and as he tried to touch it, he heard, "It is not by your strength, it is by your gratitude." These stories multiplied, but the Pope ordered absolute silence. Why? Because, according to him, if gratitude became a spectacle, it would lose its power. And here's the point that might shock you. The enemy is not afraid of the rosary. He fears the heart that holds it, a grateful heart. Wounded, yes, but still choosing to trust. Do you understand now why the Pope said gratitude is war? It's not a feeling. It's an invisible sword that cuts through ancient chains, that shatters spiritual agreements made in times of darkness. That expels the murmuring from homes, families, and generations. Maybe the pain you're living through today isn't punishment. Maybe it's an altar, and the gratitude you offer there will be your key. That's why, before going further, the Pope left one last appeal. Pray, but don't ask. Give thanks until it bleeds. If this video is touching you, like it now. Comment from which city you're watching and share it with someone who needs to break the silence. Because where there is gratitude, heaven responds. In the silence of the Vatican crypts, Leo XIV was preparing something few understood at the time: a counter-ritual. He knew that while the world was caught up in visible battles, political, social, ideological, there was a much deeper war being waged in the shadows, a war for spiritual frequency, for atmospheres, for repeated thoughts that become invisible prisons. The Pope began teaching that constant ingratitude was not just an emotional weakness, but a disguised invocation, a kind of reversed prayer. Complaining is praying to the darkness, he said. That's why the Rosary with true gratitude was not just prayer. It was rebellion. It was sabotage against a spiritual system that feeds on our frustration. And that's why he started writing the Breviary of Resistance, a collection of secret reflections that would only be discovered years later, hidden behind a painting of the Annunciation. In it, Leo XIV claimed that each decade of the Rosary, when prayed with real gratitude, deprogrammed negative spiritual codes inherited from past generations. It was as if prayer with gratitude had the power to reverse silent curses, open breaches sealed by pride, and restore contaminated bloodlines. He explained it with a somber example: families where divorce is the norm, where depression repeats itself, where bankruptcy is cyclical, where everyone says, "It feels like a curse." And then the Pope would ask, how many in that house still give thanks for what they don't understand? Because, he said, grateful I don't understand breaks the "it's always been this way." That was the true secret of the grateful Rosary. It doesn't just reach heaven, it rewrites the earth. And you? How many times have you caught yourself praying just to ask, to complain, to beg? But what if, instead of saying, "Deliver me from this," you said, "Thank you for this dessert. May it fulfill its purpose in me"? That simple inversion changes everything, because gratitude is the language of the redeemed, of those who have already won, even before the victory manifests. Gratitude is a spiritual battle cry that hell cannot withstand. Have you ever imagined that the chains surrounding you might not need to be broken by force, but by praise? So try this today. Don't ask. Give thanks and watch. Because where there is gratitude, the enemy is disarmed. Can you hear it? Not with your ears, but with your spirit. Because there is a frequency that echoes when someone broken inside kneels to pray and chooses to give thanks. It's as if the invisible world trembles for a second. As if demons that feed on complaints are expelled by the simple force of one word: thank you. And that's exactly what began to spread across regions of Europe after the silent mission of the Sentinels of the Broken Rosary. No cameras, no announcements, just rosaries handed out in silence, prayers offered in secret, and a wave of phenomena defying any logical explanation. In a small town in Belgium, a woman blind since childhood began praying the Rosary with gratitude every day, saying, "Thank you for the darkness that taught me to listen." 30 days later, she woke up with her vision restored. The doctors said it was impossible, but she replied, "I didn't ask to see, I just thanked him for the blindness." In Naples, a former mafia member in solitary confinement began praying the Rosary with the secret group. On the 22nd day, he had a vision of Christ's face, bloodied, saying, "Your gratitude pierced the prison." He was not released from prison, but he was freed from guilt. And that reveals a deep point Leo XIV emphasized with tears. Gratitude doesn't always change the circumstance, but it always changes the atmosphere. And in the spiritual world, atmosphere is everything. When you complain, you invite darkness. When you give thanks, you release light, even without words. The Pope taught that every mystery of the Rosary, prayed with gratitude, creates a crack in the spiritual structures, imprisoning entire cities. It's not exaggeration, it's war, just without gunpowder, just without screams. A war that begins with someone saying thank you while the ground shakes. That's why Satan hates the grateful heart, because the grateful heart sees God where no one else does. Praising in loss, praising in pain, praising in the valley. And that praise is a cry hell cannot silence, do you see? Your family might be in spiritual warfare, and you're waiting for a miracle. But maybe the miracle is waiting for your gratitude. Are you ready to pray today, not to ask, but to offer? Offer your pain, your waiting, your tear, and in the end say, thank you, Lord. Still, thank you. The walls of the Vatican were never the same after that. It was an ordinary morning, clear skies, bells ringing. But inside the Apostolic Library, something inexplicable occurred. An ancient manuscript, never translated, written in an extinct language resembling Aramaic, fell on its own from one of the highest shelves. No one touched it. No one was looking for it. But it fell, open to a page marked with ashes. The manuscript was immediately sent to Pope Leo XIV. When deciphered, with the help of multilingual monks, one phrase made him tremble. When the last of the grateful praise their final rosary, the wall will fall and the roar will be unleashed. Roar, wall. The Pope understood it as an ancient prophecy about what he had already called the murmuring, that spiritual entity fed by complaint, self-pity, and everyday ingratitude. But now there was something more. This prophecy seemed to indicate the existence of a containment wall built by prayers of past generations, and that it would only remain standing as long as truly grateful people existed in the world. When the number of bitter hearts surpassed the grateful ones, the seal would break. This is no allegory, the Pope told a small group of theologians. We are witnessing a spiritual countdown, and the pointer is falling. That same month, a convent in Poland was destroyed by a mysterious fire. The stone altar remained intact, but what surprised everyone was the wooden rosary, the one engraved Non Murmurabis, found beneath the ashes, glowing but not burned. The surviving nun said she heard a voice during the fire. They are trying to silence gratitude, but as long as there is one who gives thanks, they will not prevail. Leo XIV understood. The attacks that seemed physical were, in fact, spiritual. The goal was to suffocate gratitude in churches, in families, in hearts. He then issued a secret document known as the Decree of the Last Grateful One, instructing bishops to quietly launch intercessory campaigns, not for miracles, but for grateful hearts. Because now it was clear, the final battlefield would not be doctrinal nor political, but emotional. Do you understand what this means? That your routine complaints are not harmless, that your murmuring is not just venting, that every thank you you utter, even unwillingly, is another brick in that wall that protects us from the final roar. Maybe no one sees what you suffer, but when you choose to give thanks anyway, all of heaven rises and hell retreats. Rome slept, but the Vatican did not. That night, Leo XIV was found kneeling before the crucifix in his private chapel. His hands were slightly bloodied, not from miraculous stigmata, but from gripping the rosary too tightly. He didn't groan. He didn't speak. He simply whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Some thought it was delirium, but the truth ran far deeper. The Pope knew something was approaching, something that could not be faced with treaties or formal exorcisms. It would be a spiritual wave, an inversion of values, a type of global emotional collapse where sadness would become fashionable and resentment a virtue. And in the center of that darkness, only one kind of soul would endure, the grateful soul. He then made one final gesture. He sent a handwritten letter to an isolated convent in the Syrian desert. It contained only one sentence: "Keep the last flame lit. When all hate the cross, thank God for it." That same week, earthquakes shook Turkey. A solar storm disrupted communication networks across northern Europe, and strangely, a statue of the Virgin Mary in Marseille, in front of hundreds of faithful, began to weep with golden tears. The Church made no official statement. But Leo XIV knew the signs were intensifying. Behind the scenes, exorcist priests began to report a new phenomenon, possessions that did not react to commands, but trembled when the exorcist said, "Thank you, Lord, for this suffering." It was as if gratitude burned demons more effectively than any ritual, and that confirmed the Pope's suspicion. Authentic gratitude is a kind of light that darkness cannot bear. Have you noticed how the world mocks the grateful? How those who give thanks in pain are seen as fools, naive, weak. But in truth, they are the real warriors, because only those who are grateful without understanding are truly aligned with heaven. True faith is not just believing, it's trusting without explanation, and giving thanks in the fire is the prayer of the saints. Do you want to protect yourself from what's coming? It's not about stockpiling supplies, nor escape plans. It's about building what Leo XIV called the invisible armor, a heart that says thank you even when everything falls apart. That heart cannot be destroyed. It was night in the Vatican, but in the secret archives one light remained on. One of the Pope's closest aides found, atop the desk, the last letter written by Leo XIV before his final retreat. It wasn't sealed, nor addressed. It seemed to have been written for anyone, or for all of us. The letter read, "If you can still give thanks, then you are still fighting. Do not give up, because the roar has already begun, but the wall is still standing." That was his final message. After that, Leo XIV disappeared for 3 full days, sending the Curia into panic. When he returned, he was thin, exhausted, but with a glow in his eyes no one could explain. He simply said, "I was there. I saw what's coming. And I heard, as long as there is gratitude, there will be mercy." He explained nothing further. He simply withdrew into deep silence, broken only by the sound of rosary beads in his hand. Months later, the Vatican began distributing millions of regular rosaries with one simple modification. Behind the cross, in small letters, was engraved, "Thank you for everything." It was Leo XIV's final gesture, and here lies the most disturbing mystery. The places where these rosaries were prayed with true gratitude experienced unprecedented spiritual transformations. Homes with a history of suicide became havens of reconciliation. Marriages on the verge of divorce found forgiveness. Cold churches rediscovered tears, bent knees, and healing. But the most astonishing moment happened in São Paulo, Brazil. During a vigil with over 40,000 young people, everyone received the rosary and was instructed to silently thank God for every pain they carried. The crowd remained in total silence for 7 minutes. And at the end, a strong wind swept through the stadium. Microphones cut off, cameras stopped recording, and many reported hearing in their spirits, "I received your praise." The next morning, local newspapers reported that no hospitals in the city had received any cases of domestic violence that night, something unprecedented in decades. Leo XIV did not live to see the fruit of it all, but perhaps he already knew. Perhaps this had been the secret all along. Gratitude is the language hell cannot decode, because the devil understands fear. He understands hatred. He understands doubt. But when someone, wounded, betrayed, bankrupt, still says, "Thank you, Lord," there is no hell that can remain standing. Are you ready to be that voice? Then do it now. Take your rosary, breathe, and give thanks. The invisible war rages on, but now you know the most feared weapon. If this video touched you, like it now. Comment which city you're watching from, and share it with someone who needs to defeat the darkness. With gratitude,